They come in their millions, unfeeling, destructive, ready to tear apart any Russian soldier who is unfortunate enough to get in their way. Putin knows them and fears them. His soldiers are scared to death all over the battlefield, as Ukraine is unleashing a war-ending swarm that is going to be an unstoppable force. The Russian front lines are being flooded with a weapon that Putin's patsies know all too well: FPV drones. The enemy will feel it, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky declared as he delivered a speech to mark Ukrainian Gunsmith Day on April 13th. He went on to declare that Ukraine has developed into a major force as an arms developer, and the primary factor driving this development is the millions of FPV drones that Ukraine is now producing. They have set the stage for everything that Ukraine does now. The interceptor drones, long-range missile drone hybrids, and robotic systems that Ukraine is also developing have all been made possible because Putin's invasion forced the country to develop its expertise in FPV drones. Russia has created a monster, and that monster is eating Putin's forces alive on the battlefield. The capabilities of Ukraine's defense industry amount to millions of FPV drones per year, Zelensky roared. Ukraine's drones are now traveling historic distances, with the current record of 1,750 kilometers or 1,087 miles for a single strike likely to be broken soon as the likes of the Flamingo, Neptune, Ruta, and more undergo continued development. But the one place where the millions of Ukrainian drones are being felt most of all is on the front lines. The numbers prove it. As Ukraine's defense industry levels up over and over again, the results are seen in the record numbers of casualties that Russia is experiencing. According to Al Jazeera, Ukraine tallied 35,351 confirmed casualties in March alone, with drones being responsible for 96% of the Russian dead and wounded. That casualty rate was 29% higher than we saw in February, which is a number large enough that Russia can't even use March having 3 more days to excuse it. Compare the first 3 months of 2026 to last year and you get into the real record-breaking stuff. Right now, Russia is suffering 316 casualties for every square kilometer of Ukraine that it captures. Last year, that number was 120 casualties. Almost triple the number of Russian soldiers are dying for the same amount of territory. And it's the millions upon millions of drones that Ukraine produces that are doing the lion's share of the damage. The percentages vary depending on the source. Zelensky himself says that drones are now responsible for about 90% of Russia's casualties, which is roughly in line with Al Jazeera's claims. On the front lines, the commander of Ukraine's 431st Separate Unmanned Aerial Systems Battalion, Ilya Mashina, puts the number at closer to 80%. But quibbles about the percentage aside, the message that Putin needs to have forced into his ears is clear: Ukraine's drone revolution is destroying Russia. The terrors in the skies are only going to get stronger and more capable. All of this has been made possible by explosive growth within Ukraine's defense sector that simply wouldn't have happened if Putin's desire for an empire hadn't overwhelmed whatever sense of logic that he once had. Ukraine was already a fairly prominent weapons exporter and manufacturer. The Kyiv Post says that it ranked 10th in the world for weapons exports in 2016, though that only amounted to $528 million in sales. That number would look nice in your bank account, but it's dwarfed by the billions of dollars that the likes of Russia and the US make from selling their weapons. Plus, the outlet notes many of Ukraine's exports from around this time consisted of Soviet-era equipment that it had repaired and sold on. Now, things are much different. The millions of drones that Ukraine is building every year aren't just tearing through Russian soldiers and equipment, they are the foundation on which an entire defense industry is being built. An industry that is attracting attention from all over Europe and more recently the Middle East, as Ukraine's expertise in aerial and ground robotics is starting to attract the sort of investment that could take the number of drones it builds from millions into tens of millions. We'll be coming back to the insane rise of Ukraine's weapons industry soon. After all, it's the reason behind the massive shift we're seeing on the battlefield right now. But first, let's focus on Ukraine's FPV drones. Though Zelensky is referring to all of Ukraine's drones when he shares the millions number, FPV drones represent the bulk of what Ukraine is making. They are also becoming the unstoppable force that Russia's soldiers simply can't handle. And to explain why, let's transport ourselves into the boots of a Russian soldier for a moment, courtesy of a brilliant report by The Telegraph that explains exactly what it feels like to encounter one of Ukraine's FPV drones on the battlefield. You try to creep forward through the wreckage and burned foliage of the battlefield. Both are signs of what happens in a seemingly never-ending war. You find cover and you hide. Overhead, you can hear the faint buzzing. A peek outside reveals that drones are circling overhead. You don't know if they're destructive FPV drones or reconnaissance drones that will summon the FPV drones to your position. All you know is that you need to get back into hiding so that the cameras built into the drones don't catch sight of you. not that it will matter. Unknown to you, FPV drones are doing more than circling the skies. They're lurking in the high grass and forested regions, waiting to pounce on any Russian soldier who dares try to move forward. FPV drones are also flying through buildings, as their small size makes it possible for them to fly through open windows and cracks. In the end, those are the drones that get you. As much as you try to hide, Ukraine's overwhelming number of FPV drones makes it possible for the country to search everywhere in the vast kill zones it's created. You heard the buzzing getting louder as the drones searched the wrecked building in which you took shelter. By the time the buzz had turned into a roaring cacophony of noise, it was too late to run. The drone hit you. You're eliminated from the war. And there are many, many more of these flying terrors awaiting your comrades. This is the fate shared by thousands of Russian soldiers who are ordered into the vast kill zones that Ukraine has created. Stretching tens of kilometers beyond the front lines, these kill zones see Ukraine combine a mixture of weapons that are designed to slow Russian advances, funnel troops into designated spots for artillery ambushes, and ultimately wipe out Russian assaults before they ever really get off the ground. Trenches and dragon's teeth fill these kill zones, stopping tanks and armored vehicles in their tracks. Spool upon spool of barbed wire is laid out, forcing Russian soldiers to move slowly lest they be sliced to ribbons. But underpinning it all are the FPV drones, deployed in their hundreds and constantly watching. It's these drones that descend on the tanks that get stuck in ditches. FPV drones are so often the last thing that a Russian soldier sees when they're trying to slowly cut their way through barbed wire. And it's all down to the fact that Ukraine can now create millions of these drones, which is what allows the kill zones to even exist at all. Without FPV drones, these kill zones would be more like traditional defenses that were erected in many ground wars up to this point. Ditches and barbed wire are hardly new. They're defenses that have been used for as long as tanks have existed. The drones are the added component. And they're so effective not just because Ukraine has become a master of the technology behind FPV drones, but it's also found a way to manufacture those drones at scale. Even as Russia assaults its territory, Ukraine has developed a weapons manufacturing industry that has become the envy of the entire world. But before we dig deeper into that, this is a quick reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you're getting value from this video, remember to subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with our uploads. So we know that Ukraine is building millions of drones, Zelensky told us. The question now is, how did a Ukrainian defense industry that was once almost wholly reliant on selling repaired Soviet-era equipment develop into the behemoth that it is today? The maturation of Ukraine's drone development processes has had a huge role to play in all of this. Earlier in the war, Ukraine's drone manufacturers weren't organized. They could barely even be called manufacturers in the traditional sense of the word. Often, a manufacturer was an IT engineer tinkering with commercially available drones at home to turn them into killing machines, or a small collective of volunteers who got together to start making drones to account for Ukraine's needs. The Lazar Group is a perfect example of this do-it-yourself early attitude. Now one of the most important drone units in Ukraine's military, the group was started by a former Ukrainian TV producer who had funds and the desire to develop drones. Working alongside volunteers, that's exactly what the producer did. Now that producer, Pavlo Yelizarov, is the Ukrainian Air Force's deputy commander. That sort of upward trajectory mirrors that experienced by Ukraine's drone industry and its defense sector as a whole. Over the last 4 years, we've seen Ukraine's drone manufacturers go from having ramshackle operations hidden away in basements to becoming full-fledged businesses that are not only keeping Ukraine on the front foot in the war, but will likely become a foundational stone of Ukraine's post-war economy. Ukrainian drone manufacturers are now getting listed on NASDAQ, as is the case with the AI startup Swarmer. Other producers are signaling deals with companies in the US and Europe, which brings in much-needed investment that allows them to increase manufacturing volumes and develop the next generations of FPV drones that will unleash hell on Russian soldiers in Ukraine. The numbers alone show us how much of a role drones have played in expanding Ukraine's defense sector. Before Putin launched his invasion in 2022, Ukraine's defense sector was underfunded and reliant on selling archaic equipment. But since then, it has grown enormously in value. According to the Kyiv School of Economics, Ukraine's defense sector is now worth $6.8 billion, which is 6 times its value in 2021. Ukraine has around 1,200 private defense companies, which combine to have the capacity to produce $50 billion worth of weapons, assuming they attract the appropriate investment. Ukraine has built a $50 billion industry in 4 years as bombs fall all around. Drones are at the heart of all of it. One of the key factors behind Ukraine's systemization of its drone production was the introduction of the Brave One system. Launched in April 2023 and entirely state-owned, Brave One allows Ukraine's government to issue grants to drone developers and other weapons manufacturers. Tens of millions of dollars have been invested via this program, all with an eye toward helping Ukraine's drone developers build businesses rather than basement operations. The previously mentioned Swarmer was one of Brave One's many beneficiaries. That NASDAQ-listed business got a leg up from a $48,000 Brave One investment that has allowed the company to balloon into what we see today. Today, we are starting to see more traditional business mechanisms take over, which allows for the sort of drone production that Zelensky mentions. Smaller companies are merging into larger drone manufacturers, which has resulted in about 80% of Ukraine's total drone production being handled by a small handful of firms that have grown because Ukraine saw the value in FPV drones and other unmanned vehicles. Investment in a war effort has turned Ukraine's drone industry into big business. Again, the numbers showcase everything. According to the Kyiv Independent, Ukraine produced 4.5 million drones in 2025. Rewind to 2 years prior, and the numbers were much smaller. Just 300,000 drones were produced in 2023. Incidentally, that's the same number of drones that the US intends to produce over the next 2 years. Of course, America spends far more on much more advanced weaponry than Ukraine is building, but let's say Ukraine is pulled into a war where drones are the answer to a lot of the cost-cutting questions. Say a war with a country like Iran, which uses cheap Shahid drones to attack facilities. Suddenly, 300,000 drones over 2 years looks like small potatoes, and a gap opens up that could be filled by Ukrainian drone manufacturers selling their products to the US military. Those sorts of deals will be the reason why Ukraine's ability to produce millions of drones annually will be so crucial in the post-war period, when the country is rebuilding its economy. Ukraine has rewritten the rules of ground warfare with its FPV drones, and the rest of the world will play catch-up by buying Ukrainian tech when that tech is no longer needed to fend off Russia. But let's come back to the battlefield for a moment. Selling drones to other nations is secondary to flooding contested territory with drones right now for Ukraine. And what the growth of the country's domestic defense industry allows is for Ukraine to become less reliant on other nations for its defense than it has been at any other point during the war with Russia. Again, we've seen huge developments from the early months of the invasion to today. When Putin first sent troops into Ukraine, it was Ukraine's brave initial defense that pushed Russia's forces back and set what would become the battle lines that we've seen ever since. However, the defense had to be sustained. For years, the reason why Ukraine was able to survive and stay in the fight was because of the military aid that it received from other nations. That aid is still flowing in, of course. According to the Kiel Institute's Ukraine support tracker, Ukraine has received about 316.7 billion euros, or a little over $373 billion, in allocated aid from the US and Europe over the last 4 years. That's a lot of money, and it has been essential to Ukraine. But what this aid means is that Ukraine has sometimes found itself beholden to the rules for weapons usage that have been set by its allies. Several examples of this were seen in 2025. The year saw the US stop providing military aid and intelligence to Ukraine, though both were later restored. America also created a new approval method for the use of ATACMS against Russia that essentially served to block Ukraine's use of the missile. Ukraine has since started using ATACMS once more, but the point stands that relying on foreign aid also meant that Ukraine had to roll with the punches of a sometimes turbulent geopolitical situation. Fast forward to 2026, and Ukraine's domestic defense sector has expanded to the point where Ukraine itself is now providing 82% of the weapons, equipment, and ammunition that are purchased by Ukraine's Defense Procurement Agency. Just a year before, that percentage was 46%, which means that most of the weapons purchased for Ukraine's military came from foreign partners. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense announced in February that Ukraine's production capacity has increased 50-fold since the war began, meaning that the homegrown defense industry meets more than 50% of the Ukrainian military's needs. This is a shift towards self-reliance that Putin never anticipated, and frankly, wouldn't have happened if Russia were truly the all-conquering force in Ukraine that Putin tries to claim it to be. So when Zelensky talks about Ukraine building millions of drones per year, he's not just talking about the impact those drones are having on the battlefield. Thousands of Russian soldiers being eliminated by Ukraine's homegrown weapons may capture all of the headlines, but it's everything that has led Ukraine to this point that is really important. Ukraine is becoming increasingly self-reliant, with drones being a large part of the reason why. Ukraine's drones also put it in a position where it will be able to generate billions of dollars from weapons sales in its post-war future, and are today allowing the country to sign defense deals and attract millions of dollars from the West, all of which aid it in its defense against Putin's forces. Millions and millions of drones don't just mean tens of thousands of Russians dead every month. They mean a brighter future for Ukraine when the blight of its war with Russia passes. Now, could more be done to grow Ukraine's drone manufacturing? Absolutely. There's a very simple logic at play here, which is that the more money Ukraine can get, be that through direct purchases from partners, grants, loans, or military aid, the stronger its drone manufacturing sector can become. We've seen the constant upward tick in production within that sector already. From 300,000 drones built in 2023, Ukraine hit 4.5 million in 2025, as we said earlier. The The country's 2026 target is even more ambitious. Euromaidan Press reports that Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister Serhiy Boyev has told NATO's Operational Force Development Framework that Ukraine is shooting for a target of 7 million drones built in 2026. The number could be even higher. Back in June 2025, Ukraine's former defense minister Rustem Umerov claimed that the country's targeted investment into drone manufacturing had given it the capacity to build 10 million drones every year. So 7 million drones in 2026 may be 2.5 million more than the number built during the previous year, but it's still 3 million shy of the capacity that Ukraine had almost a year ago. And who knows, that capacity might have grown even higher due to even more investment by Ukraine in the consolidation of so many of the country's once fractured drone-making companies. The point we're making here is simple. Ukraine is already in a position to flood the front lines with millions of FPV drones of its own making. And though that flood is already drowning Putin's forces by the thousands, it could be turned into a tidal wave. All Ukraine needs is more time and money. If it gets both, the drone revolution that Ukraine kick-started will be the savior of the entire nation, both during the war and in the years that follow. Now, we focused predominantly on FPV drones in this video, but Ukraine has so much more to offer than that. Right now, Ukraine is unleashing AI-powered drones that are bypassing Russia's electronic warfare equipment to destroy the country's logistics and key equipment in the rear. As FPV drones mangle Russia's soldiers on the front, the Martian is making them pay in the back, and you can find out all about it in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you are subscribed to The Military Show to see more of our coverage and analysis of Zelensky's latest remarks. Thank you as always for watching.